Hi everyone, I've got a funny story for you. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I can begin. Now this is a story about somebody that you all know. His name is Jack. Maybe you know a Jack at school, maybe you've got a friend who's called Jack, or maybe you've heard the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, or maybe you've heard about the house that Jack built, or maybe you know all about Jack and Jill who went up the hill to fetch a pail of water, or maybe you've played with playing cards and you found that after 8, 9, 10 comes the Jack with his parents, the Queen and the King. Jacks are everywhere. You'll even find one in the boot of an old car, which we used to use to change a wheel. Well, this is a story about Jack, and you all know about him. He lives with his mum in a tumble-down cottage, and Jack very often gets things wrong. And here's how the story goes. Because one day, Jack's mum, she went to her handbag, and she opened her handbag, and she took out her purse. And when she took out her purse was empty. And she said, "Oh, Jack, we ain't got no money. You're going to have to go down the road to the farm and you're going to have to go and get a job." So that's what Jack did. And he went all the way down the road to the farm and he knocked on the farmer's door. "Can you help me?" And the farmer opened the door, which was very old and needed a drop of oil, so it creaked. "Can you help me?" And Jack said, "Gives a job." And the farmer said, "Very well, Jack. You go down to my orchard where all my apple trees are full of delicious ripe fruits. You pick the apples, I'll pay you." So that's what Jack did. And he went down to the orchard and he went to pick. Can you join in? A pick. Can you pick a bit here, pick a bit there, pick a bit high, pick a bit low? And in no time at all, there were buckets full of apples ready for collection at the end of the farmer's drive. The farmer was delighted and he said, "Well done, Jack, I'll pay you." And he gave Jack a bright gold shiny coin for his wages. Oh, Jack thought, my mum's going to be so pleased, I'd better put that somewhere safe. So he put it the safest place he could think, which was up his nose. Now, you know and I know that you never stick a coin up your nose, and this is a story, and so Jack did it silly. And he stuck that coin up his nose and he started to walk home. And as he walked home, he sang himself a little song. A-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, a-do-do-do-do-do-do. And as he walked home, he was so busy singing his song that he didn't notice that the coin dropped out. And when he got home, he clambered through the door of the house and he shouted to his mum, "Mum, I'm home, and I did a really good day's work for the farmer and he paid me, Mum, and he paid me with a gold coin and I stuck it up my nose and I've got it here, look." But of course the coin had dropped out and Jack hadn't noticed. "It must be here somewhere, it must be here somewhere, Mum." Well, Jack's mum, she sat back in her chair. She looked at her son and she said, "Oh, Jack, what are you like? What am I going to do with you? You don't stick a coin up your nose. What you should have done with that coin is you should have put it somewhere good and safe, like your pocket. Now, when the farmer pays you tomorrow, put your wages in your pocket." So the very next day, Jack went down the road to the farm. He knocked on the farmer's door and the farmer opened the door with a creak. And Jack said, "Gives a job." And the farmer said, "Oh, all right, Jack, you can go out the back and you can milk my cows." And so that's what Jack did. He milked. And by the end of the day, there were churns full of creamy milk lined up for collection. The farmer was delighted and he said, "Jack, I'm gonna pay you." And so he gave Jack his wages. But today, Jack's wages were a big, delicious, creamy jug of milk. "Oh, my mum's going to be so pleased," said Jack. "Now, where did she tell me to put my wages? Not up my nose." "In me pocket." So that's what Jack did. He poured half the jug of milk in this pocket. And when that pocket was full, he poured the other half of the jug of milk in the other pocket. And he popped the jug down and he started to walk home. And as he walked home, it sounded like this. Because of course the milk ran into his pockets and into his pants and down his legs and into his socks and into his shoes. And Jack squelched all the way home. When he got home, he stumbled through the door of the house and he shouted, "Mum, I'm home and I did a really good day's work for the farmer and he paid me with milk and I put it in my pocket just like he told me to do." Well, he peeled off his socks, and between his toes was yoghurt and cottage cheese. And Jack's mum, she sat back in her chair and she said, "Oh, Jack, what are you like? What am I going to do with you? You don't stick milk in your pocket. Have you never read that library book, Candace Surprise?" And she carries things on top of her head. "Now, tomorrow, when you get paid, you bring your wages home on your head." "Righto," said Jack, "that's just what I'll do." And the very next day, he went down the road to the farm. He knocked on the farmer's door, and the farmer opened that old creaky door. And Jack said, "Gives a job." And the farmer said, "Oh, all right, Jack. You can go down to my potato patch and you can give it a good digging over." And so that's what Jack did. And he went down the tater patch and he went dig, 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 dig. And by the end of the day, the weeds were gone and the farmer was delighted. He said, "Jack, thank you very much. I would like to pay you." And he gave Jack his wages. And it was a beautiful big golden block of creamy butter. "Oh, my mum will be so pleased," said Jack. "She loves a bit of butter on her crumpets in the morning. Now, how have I got to get this butter home?" And he remembered. His mum had told him to put it on his head. So Jack, he was sensible. He took his hat off and he put that butter on top of his head. He got some brains in him today, and then he put his hat back on top of his head because he didn't want the flies landing on the butter. And then he walked home, and as he walked home, he began to whistle a tune. Can you whistle? It was a beautiful evening. The sun was high in the sky, and it was warm on Jack's shoulders, and it was warm on Jack's head. And of course the butter began to melt. And the butter melted all the way down Jack's ears, and all the way down Jack's back, and all the way round Jack's bottom, and all the way out of Jack's trousers, and all the way into his socks. And in the end, Jack wasn't walking home. He was skidding home. And he slithered over the doorway of the house and he shouted, "Mum, I'm home, and I did a really good day's work with the farmer, and he paid me with butter, and I put it on my head, and..." When he took his hat off, all the butter was yucky and greasy and melted into his hair and all the way down his ears. And his mum, she sat back in her chair and she said, "Oh, Jack, what are you like? What am I going to do with you? You don't put butter on your head. What you should have done is kept that butter shielded with some nice cool leaves. Now, when the farmer pays you tomorrow, shield your wages with some nice cool leaves and carry it back on your hands." "That's what I'll do," said Jack. And the very next day he went down the road to the farm. He knocked on the farmer's door, and the farmer opened the creaky door. And Jack said, "Gives a job." And the farmer said, "All right, Jack. What you can do is you can go out to my hen house and you can collect all the eggs and wash the poo off them." So that's what Jack did. He picked all of the eggs and he gently, carefully washed all the chicken poo off those eggs so that there were platters and platters of beautiful eggs ready to be taken to market the next day. The farmer was delighted. He said, "Jack, I'm going to pay you, thank you very much, and I'm going to give you this beautiful little black and white pussycat." Oh, it was gorgeous. Whiskers, paws, and a twitchy little nose. Meow. And Jack there said, "Oh, my mum will be delighted. We've got loads of mice eating all the cheese in the pantry. We'll set the cat to look after them mice." And so he thought to himself, how have I got to get the cat home? Me mum told me to keep it cool with leaves on it. So Jack picked some big leaves from the side of the road and he sat the cat on top of the leaves. Then he picked a few more leaves and he sprinkled them on top of the cat's head. What do you think the cat did? It tried to jump off Jack's hands, but Jack said, "You're coming home with me." And he gripped on real tight to that poor cat's fur and that poor cat's skin. And the cat didn't like it one little bit. And it began to meow and hiss and scratch. And in the end, Jack could not hold on to that cat any longer. Ow! Had to let the cat go. And the cat disappeared off round the corner as fast as greased lightning. Well, Jack had to go home. All his arms were scratched. His spirit was dejected. And as he made his way over the threshold, in his really dejected voice, he said, "Mum, I'm home. And I worked really hard for the farmer and he paid me with a cat when I put leaves on its head and it ran away." His mum, she sat back in a chair and she said, "Oh, Jack, what are you like? What am I going to do with you? You don't put leaves on a cat's head. What you should have done is got a bit of old baler twine and you should have made a little lead for that cat. Not too tight, but just gently round that cat's neck. And then you should have coaxed it home, making all those lovely little encouraging noises that a cat likes, like pss, 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 and psh, 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 psh. And the cat would tiptoe along if you give it a little gentle tug." "Right, Mum, that's what I'll do." And Jack put a bit of old baler twine in his pocket, ready for his next day at work. And he went down the road to the farm and he knocked on the farmer's door and the farmer opened the creaky door. And Jack said, "Gives a job." And the farmer said, "Oh, fantastic. Jack, you can go out into the yard and you can muck out the cows, you can muck out the pigs and you can muck out the hen house too." That's what Jack did all day. He shoveled the muck, made a great big pile of it and put down fresh straw for all the animals. The farmer was delighted and he said, "Thank you, Jack. I would like to pay you." And he gave Jack his wages, and that day he gave Jack a beautiful big leg of beef. Prime beef. And Jack said, "Oh, my mum, she loves a roast dinner. She will be pleased with this. Now, how have I got to get this beef home?" And he remembered. What had he got in his pocket? A piece of baler twine. So he got the baler twine and he tied it around the end of the leg, dropped the leg of beef on the floor and began to drag that beef home. And every so often he'd turn round and he'd say, "Psst, psst, 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 ch, 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 ch. Come on, Beefy, Beefy. Come on, Beefy, Beefy." And he dragged that beef all the way home. He dragged that beef through muddy puddles. He dragged that beef through cow paths. And in the end, when he got home, on the end of that string, there was a horrible, dirty lump of inedible meat. And he came home. He came through the doorway and he shouted, "Mum, I'm home and I did a really good day's work for the farmer. Look what he gave me. Ta-da!" And he lifted up that leg of beef and there it was, disgusting, covered in muck and stones and grass and grit. And his mum, she sat back in her chair and she said, "Oh, Jack, what are you like? What are we going to do with you? You can't put a leg of beef on a lead and drag it home through all the puddles and the muck. You should have carried that beef home on your shoulders. Now look, when the farmer pays you tomorrow, carry your wages home on your shoulders and then no harm will come to it." So that's what Jack said that he would do. And the very next day, he went down the road to the farm. He knocked on the farmer's door and the farmer opened his door with a creak. And Jack said, "Gives a job." And the farmer said, "I tell you what, Jack, here's an oil can. You go around all the hinges of all the doors in my farm and in my house and you oil those hinges so they don't creak anymore." So Jack spent the whole day with the oil can, oiling the hinges. At the end of the day, none of the doors creaked anymore and the farmer was delighted. He said, "Jack, I've got you your wages. Come round the back with me." And he took him round to the back barn and there were Jack's wages. Oh, it had 2 ears, it had 4 legs, it was strong and hard working with a wonderful brown grey fur. It was a donkey. And the farmer said, "There you go, thank you very much." And Jack said, "Oh, my mum will be delighted. She loves a donkey." And so Jack thought, how was he going to take his wages home? Now, I don't put the donkey up my nose, and I don't put the donkey in my pocket, and I don't put the donkey on my head, and I don't cover the donkey with leaves and put it in my hat. And he remembered what his mum had told him. Put his wages on his shoulders. So that's what he did. He went to the donkey, had the front legs here, the back legs here. He put his head under the donkey's belly and he hefted that donkey right up onto his shoulders. Was the donkey happy? No! The donkey began to kick and brake. And Jack said, stay on, I'm taking you home. And trudging underneath that kicking, braying donkey, Jack began to make the long road home. Now, to get home, Jack had to cross a river, and the river was spanned by a bridge, and shortly beyond the bridge, the river forked and became the moat to a castle, and high up in the walls of the castle was a window, and there in the window was the face of a princess. Oh, and she was the most miserable princess in the whole wide world. She had never once smiled, she had never once laughed. And on this day, there she was, looking out of the window, saying, oh, it's rubbish round here. Nothing good ever happens. I am so bored. And her father, the king, he'd paid magicians and jesters and storytellers and comedians to come and make his daughter laugh, but nobody had managed to crack her face once. But on this day, as she peered out of a window, she looked down onto that bridge and she saw the most comical sight in the world. There was a donkey and a man, but the man was not riding on the donkey was riding on the man, and the donkey was not happy, and the donkey was kicking and braying, and Jack was there struggling under the fat donkey's weight, saying, stay on boy, and they were trudging and struggling over the bridge, and the princess did something she had never done in the whole of her life. The corners of her mouth just began to twitch, and her lips went tight over her teeth, and her shoulders began to shake at the sight. And then eventually she couldn't hold that laugh in any longer, and her lips peeled back and her teeth opened and she began to laugh. And there was Jack struggling, and there was the donkey braying, and the princess was clutching her sides with laughter. Well, the sound of the princess' laughter echoed all the way down the spiral staircase and along the corridors and in to the throne room and into the ears of her father, the king, who sat on his throne and went, hark! That is the sound that I have waited my entire fatherhood to hear. It is the sound of my daughter laughing. And the king, he ran up the spiral staircase, he peered over his daughter's shoulders, and he too saw the shenanigans going on the bridge. Stay on, boy. And the king began to laugh too, clutching his belly. And the princess was laughing and pointing. And between gasps for breath, the king shouted, Jack, come into the castle. I want to have a word with you. And Jack stopped and froze, and he said, oh, here we go, donkey. Well done. You have made such a noise that now the king wants to go and chop my head off for making a noise in his kingdom. And so Jack went up to the castle doors. He tied the donkey on a post outside the castle. And Jack, with his knees knocking and his teeth a chattering, he went into the throne room and he threw himself in front of the king's throne and he said, Your Royal Majestical Highness, I am so sorry for making a terrible noise in your kingdom. Please don't chop my head off. And the king said, No, Jack. I don't want to chop your head off. Today you have done a marvellous thing. You have done something that nobody has managed to do before. You have made my daughter laugh. I would like to reward you. And the king reached under his throne and he gave Jack 1, 2, 3 heavy bags stuffed full of golden coins. So heavy Jack could barely carry them. My mum's going to be so pleased, said Jack, as he started to struggle out of the throne room. And just as Jack was leaving, the princess leant forward and whispered into her father's ear. And the king turned round and looked at his daughter and he said, Are you sure, my dear? And the princess said. And so then the king leant forward. He stroked his beard and he put on his serious face that he used for state banquets and important occasions, cleared his throat and said, Jack, my daughter has just asked me to ask you if you would care to marry her. If you can make her laugh, I'm sure you will have a very happy life together. Well, Jack, he dropped those 3 bags of gold and he did a little dance of joy. He said, yes, 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 yes. Marry a princess? Of course I will. And so that was the deal done. And the very next day, Jack and his princess were married. And they lived in a castle made of glass in the grounds of the king's castle until one day the king died and Jack became King Jack. And he ruled fair and he ruled square. And Jack's mum, she lived in a centrally heated pensioners' bungalow there in the grounds of the castle, and her purse was never empty again. And the donkey moved into a field full of buttercups and long sweet grass, fenced by golden posts. And Jack and the king and his queen, and Jack's mum and the donkey, and even the farmer, all lived happily ever after. And so may all of